In this time, for many of us, I feel like God is exercising and he's urging for many of us to not allow, the paralyzations of fear to cause us to fall in a deep downward spiral of depression, anxiety, and worry. And this fear and this anxiousness can stem from so many places. It can stem from loss of hope, loss of trust and faith in who God is and what God has already told you. I would say, so as for myself, to get a little transparent with y'all, I got caught up. I got caught up in the fear of man. I got caught up in the fear of what others might say, what others might think, because of the obedience and because of the yes that I gave to God. And because of my yes and because of my obedience I gave to God, in the midst of that, me being fearful of that, it ended up causing me to open up unnecessary doors of uncertainty, unnecessary doors of doubts. And it became a cycle and a cycle and a cycle where I was starting to look at, I was starting to look for things in all the wrong places. I was trying to look for God in all the wrong places instead of looking for God where only God could be found. And this is not saying in the places that I was looking at that God could not be found there, but it was that simple idolization of that place in which I felt like God could only be found at. And I wanted that quick high, I wanted that quick feel good, so that I could be reaffirmed, so that I can know that this is what God told me and this is what God said, and this is how God's moving in my life. And as I was in Romans 8 the other day, God was really pressing on me heavy about recognizing your true identity in Christ, who we are in Christ, what Christ did for us, because God knew that sin led to death, because God knew that by the law that we cannot keep up with all those, things of the law, because by nature we're imperfect human beings. And that's why God had to send forth Jesus, that by his spirit, by his death, burial, and resurrection, we can be joined with him, be joined in his sufferings, be joined and be heirs of the same glory and same, victory that Jesus had already won and conquered on the cross. Through his death and his resurrection, and by also through his resurrection, we became adopted, simply adopted back into the glorious family of our Father in heaven. Now looked at not as peasants, but now looked at as royalty with God and with the Son. There was this verse in Romans 8 that was kind of really the key verse of the whole entire, thing that I'm speaking about today. That is Romans 8, verses 15 through 17. And it says, "For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified altogether." The problem for many of us, and the reason why God is saying in this time, it is a best time of consecration. It is a time of renewing your mind. It is a time of putting away the old man and putting on the new man. And like I said, the reason why God is really heavily urging us to do these things, why he's trying to get us to come into the secret place, to be renewed, to be refined by him, because there are many stops and there are many roadblocks that the enemy is trying to place in front of us to get us distracted, to make us doubtful, to make us anxious, for a lot of us to lose out on faith on what God has already, told us he was going to do and what he's already currently doing in this very exact moment. God told you that you would see life, not death. God told you that for those who are set free, the Son is free indeed. God has already told you that by and through Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross, that you are now adopted into the family of royalty, adopted into the family of righteousness and holiness. Then what happens? We tend to go through a little loop. We tend to go through a little hiccup where the enemy places, words of doubt, words of discouragement. And he'll get to telling you like, is that really what God told you? Are you really sure that's what the Lord told you? Oh, you may not be hearing from God right. Are you sure that you're hearing from God? It all stems with a question. And the reason why it stems with a question is because with that question, if the enemy can allow you to meditate on that question, the enemy can allow you to meditate on those discouraging thoughts, then it could put fear in you. Then it could put worry in you. Then it can lead to your actions and it can lead to your speech in the way that you talk and move to become your detriment and get you to spiral in mental confusion, to get you to spiral in a situation, in an unnecessary situation that didn't even have to happen if you would have just stood on your ground, if you would have just stayed rooted and planted in the Lord's face and in his word and what he's already spoken over your life. And sometimes it's not even the simple fact we don't even believe what God said. Sometimes it's just hard trusting what he said. Sometimes it's hard hanging on with hope and believing that one day that what God has spoken and what God has said will come to pass. And because you've had a life and cycles in your life of just full of nothing but just disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, when actually something that is rooted in on the foundation of truth, it is perceived to you as error. It's perceived to you as a lost and faraway dream that you can't even, reach your hands out to grab because you've been hurt so much, because you've been so disappointed so many times. That's why God said, stay at his face. Come to me, my son and my daughter. Allow me to reveal the great mysteries that I have for you. Allow me to reveal the great mysteries of who I am, of who I say I am, so that you can have hope, so that you can have encouragement. Because what God simply doesn't want is for you to be bounded by fear. And when you become bounded by fear, fear becomes your master and you become its slave. Meaning that whatever fear tells you to do, whatever fear places in your mind and your thoughts, fear becomes your God. It leads you to make choices and it leads you to make actions that are detrimental and out of the will of God, because you didn't stand on the word of truth, and because you didn't have patience and you didn't wait and you didn't allow God to renew your mind and shape you and mold you. You ended up allowing the flesh to take over. You ended up allowing the enemy to shape you and mold you into something that God never intended for you to be as. And that's why it's important that in this time we stay out of our emotions. It is so easy to get in your emotions. It is so easy for somebody to piss you off. It is so easy for you to see something on social media and for you to get doubtful and for you to get discouraged. That's why it says in Romans 8 that carnality is of the flesh and it brings death. But when you tend and set your mind onto spiritual matters and spiritual things, it brings simply nothing but peace and life. Why do you think every time you get in the secret place, you always feel peace about it, that situation? You always feel peace about what God told you. You always feel this sense of calmness, of reassurance and clarity. But as soon as you come out of the secret place, then you start to meditate on things of this world and things that are not of God, then that's when the enemy begins to strike, and that's when the doubt comes. That's when the worry comes. That's when the fear comes. That's when the enemy twists up your mind, whether that be through a video, through another person speaking over you, to get you to go off course of what God originally told you. It's simply nothing but an attack. But this is why God tells us all the time to set our minds on things above, not here on this earth. Because when you tend to meditate and set your mind on things on this earth, then you are going to conform to the patterns and the ways of this world. And I'm not gonna lie, because God had to get on me about this too, y'all. This is one generation that seeks after signs and confirmations more than any other generation. Why do you think when the Pharisees asked Jesus for a sign, Jesus said that only an adulterous and evil generation asks for a sign, but the only sign that they will get will be from the prophet Jonah? The reason why Jesus said this, and the reason why this applies for many of us today, is that after God has rooted his word in us, after God has spoken what he's spoken on us, to give us that clarity, to give us that reassurance, give us that peace and life through him, what do we tend to do? We tend to divert and go back to the very exact thing that left us wounded, going back to the very exact thing that left us confused and anxious. And now we're being tossed to and fro like the wind because we're allowing too many things in, allowing too much noise, and we're allowing too many voices to enter into our spirit. That's why God is saying, why can't you just be rooted in me? Why do you idolize and seek after confirmations, to seek after signs when I've already told you what it was? Son and daughter, do you not trust my word? Do you not trust what I have spoken of your life? Do you not trust what I have shown you? Instead of you going to different numerous prophets and different type of TikToks and Instagram videos, I need you to come to me. What Jesus wanted the Pharisees to realize was that the sign was right in front of them the whole entire time. He said, y'all looking for a sign, but the sign is sitting right in front of you, but you can't even realize it, or you can't even see it because you're thinking carnally. Meaning you're thinking with your flesh and you're thinking with your emotions, which is what many of us will do. God will give us the clarity, he'll give us the answers, he'll give us the revelation. But yet then we go and tend to go over to videos, go on different prophets' lives, this and the third. And then you end up hearing a word that you don't want to hear. You end up hearing a word that was the opposite and contrary to what God originally told you. Now you're lost, now you're doubting, now you're worried. But God is like, if you would just stop seeking after everybody else and just seek me, you would see that I'm standing right in front of you the whole entire time. You would see that the only confirmation that you need is in your word. It's in your word right there. Even in Proverbs 29:25, it says that the fear of man brings snare, but whoever shall trust in the Lord will be safe. So stop allowing people's opinions, stop allowing what people speak over your life to cause you to fear. Stop allowing the obedience in which God had called you to walk into, the calling which God walked you into. What people might think when they see you walking into it paralyze you and stop you from doing what God called you to do. Because by you not trusting in God, by you only trusting and caring about what man thinks and what man says, you are going to see yourself walking out the will of God. You are going to see yourself end up confused, hurt, and dumbfounded. Whether you got to go back to old prophetic notebooks, if you got to seek God in the word and in prayer to get back that reassurance and confirmation, Do that rather than going to every other prophet or person or anything to speak onto you. Idolize the confirmation giver, not the confirmation itself. Hope this helps. I love you, and so does God.